Good morning. I'm Santiago Carbó, Professor of Economics and Finance at CUNEF Business School and Director of Financial Studies at Funkas think tank. We are here this morning with Professor Andrei Kirilenko from Imperial College, who's a worldwide well-known expert in fintech and digital finance. What is the purpose of your visit to Madrid and here to Fintech Plaza, fantastic place for fintech industry?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. It's great to be here at Fintech Plaza. I'm here as a visiting scholar at the CUNEF Business School, where we are looking more in depth on how we can add fintech broadly and how digital technologies change in finance to the business school curriculum. I've done it before at the Imperial College Business School, and I've done it prior to that in the United States at the MIT Sloan School of Business. So in both places I built centers that really serve as a foundation on which you can build on research and educational and outreach efforts related to fintech.
What is your current position and what is your main trajectory in your professional life, because you have a very extensive experience in the finance and fintech world?
So I'm currently a professor at Imperial College and director of the Fintech Center there, which I founded 3 years ago. The Fintech Center is supported by the financial services industry and looks into how digital technologies change finance. Prior to that, I was professor of finance at MIT Sloan School of Management, and prior to that, I was chief economist at the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which is the regulator of derivatives in the United States. I was there during the crisis, and myself and my team were in the process of overhauling the whole sort of financial marketplace in the context of the crisis that, arguably started in the area of OTC derivatives. As I was doing that, I came into a realization that digital technologies have really become central to finance. There are no longer back office type of issues. Digital technologies have become so central that, in fact, what is being offered has become so complex, so systemic, and so difficult sometimes to understand that we really need to figure out how technology, regulation, and finance come together. So that brought me back to academia from the regulatory space, where I spent quite a bit of time. And I started writing papers, building centers, teaching courses, so that what I learned about how finance has changed, both as a result of digital technologies and as a result of the global financial crisis, goes into research, into curriculum, so that we build a new, better, more resilient financial system globally. I've done it in the US. I have some understanding how things are done in the UK, and I would really like to understand what is happening in Spain. I feel that some of these ideas are global. Certainly digital technologies are global. And so figuring out what's happening in Spain is also a very important part of my agenda.
You mentioned the financial crisis that took around 10 years ago, and now we've had a very strong emergence of the fintech industry just after the crisis. How do you see, the situation of the financial industry 10 years after the crisis, and particularly with the strong emergence of the fintech industry?
Right. I feel that, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in detail, but I feel that the global financial crisis sort of coincided in some way with very interesting developments in the digital technology space. There are three, in my opinion, key digital technologies that were released right before the global financial crisis. Amazon Cloud Computing was released to the public in 2006. iPhone, mobile telephony, was introduced in 2007, and Bitcoin blockchain was introduced in 2008. Then global financial crisis hit, but financial institutions were in the business of survival. They were not in a position of internalizing these technologies. That gave an opportunity to startups to really use these technologies and offer financial services using mobile phones, such as mobile banking, mobile insurance, mobile wealth management. Cloud computing really dramatically changed how investing and advice in wealth management is being done, because You can now do not need to buy racks and racks of computers for quantitative purposes, for number crunching. You can now do it as a service. And blockchain really dramatically changed a number of things, including how assets are created, how various assets are managed, and so forth. There are also changes affecting payments, changes affecting regulation, all through these sort of digital technologies. That window of opportunity for fintech startups, at least in the US and the UK, was open until about a couple of years ago. It has now been mostly closed. So fintech startups that started at around the time of 2008, 2009, 2010, and maybe a couple of years later, and had a chance to mature, are now in a position to compete. The ones that are starting now, they're not really in a position to compete very well because large financial institutions no longer in the business of survival. They figured out how to build their own incubators, accelerators, innovation groups, and so they're basically now buying bits and pieces of the fintech industry and attracting talent from the fintech industry so they themselves stay competitive. But those early challengers, the ones have sprung up right around the time of the global financial crisis, are competing with the existing financial institutions. So it's an evolving sort of transitioning environment, and we'll see where it goes. But no doubt, all incumbent financial institutions have to do something in response to fintech. There is no choice of not doing anything. You have to.
We are here in Spain. Spain is a bank-based country, economy, in which banks represent a large weight of the complete financial sector, financial markets, and the fintech industry here is thriving, is very strong and growing. How do you see is going to be the impact of this appearance of the fintech industry on a system like the Spanish one, which is bank-based? I mean, together with other countries like Germany, etc., in which banks are very strong?
I'd like to find out more about the Spanish banking industry and the fintech industry as well, just to see what's going on. But my understanding from what I've seen and from what I've researched is that one of the interesting things about fintech startups is that they start thinking of themselves from the point of view of satisfying particular needs of customers. They don't think of themselves as, we are a bank and therefore we have to do all this. They focus on a particular aspect of customer experience, and they'd like to make it better. And that is, I think, is where the fintech is making a difference. So I think that I'd like to see what's going to happen over time, but certainly from what I've seen in other parts of the world, basically a typical bank, a large incumbent bank, consists of many different lines that it does. It could do consumer banking, it could do mortgage banking, it could do investment banking, it could do a bit of trading, it could do wealth management, it could do payments. But as it does that, and some of them cross-subsidize each other, fintech startups typically focus on one aspect. They'll say, okay, we're going to be a mobile bank, and we're going to offer the best checking account. And that's it. And we'll create the platform, and on top of this platform, others could put applications. We are not going to focus on building the best application across the board. We're going to focus on one and provide our rails to others. So it's a platform type of approach as opposed to sort of vertically integrated approach. Think of it as an analogy would be instead of a department store, which would be a bank, you have a farmer's market. The farmer's market consists of many stalls, and different people bring things to market, and both of them have a right to exist. People sometimes go to the department store, sometimes they go to a farmer's market. So from what I've seen in the banking-dominated environment, you would have a parallel just sort of space in which fintech startups are going to be providing solutions which will be competing for customer experience.
I cannot resist to ask you one question about a very recent development, which was last week. Apple announced that they were going to offer a virtual card in their phones and tablets associated with a very famous bank, Goldman Sachs. How do you see that development? Do you think this is going to speed up all these changes in the financial world?
Very much a very interesting point is that that's another thing that sort of global financial institutions and large financial institutions started talking about not very long ago, but I think they've probably thinking about it for a while, is that they sort of no longer see fintech startups as competition, but they see large technology companies as a much, much bigger competition. Companies that already have existing client base and companies that could really compete with them. So my feeling is that it's definitely a very, very interesting outcome. Goldman Sachs itself has been changing. Goldman Sachs said we're now a technology company, we're not a bank. I visited Goldman Sachs actually just a few days ago in New York City and had a conversation there with a person who been rebuilding Goldman Sachs for the last 10 years. He was the chief information officer, chief data officer, chief financial officer at Goldman Sachs. He's been moving around and changing things. They certainly have a vision, and they have a vision that is going to take them far into the future, and I think their collaboration with Apple is one part of that vision.
And the final question is, please briefly outline what's going to be your talk about this morning here in Fintech Plaza.
I'm going to talk a bit about the same thing where I started, where the fintech industry, in my opinion, came from, and then going to talk about some of the collaborative projects that we've been doing with our research partners involving technology in markets, technology in distributed ledger, and some of the technology in banking where I'd like to interact a bit more with the people here.